Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. History often reduces Catherine Parr to the footnote of a rhyme. But who was this last wife of Henry VIII? A nursemaid, a survivor, or something much more revolutionary? Catherine Parr was born in August of 1512, likely in Kendal, Westmoreland, to a respectable and well-connected family. Her father, Sir Thomas Parr, was a courtier under both Henry VII and Henry VIII, and her mother, Lady Maud Green, was a lady-in-waiting to Queen Catherine of Aragon. And yes, it is possible that Catherine was named after the Queen. Educated in the household of her ambitious and intelligent mother, Catherine grew up speaking French and Italian, as well as a student of Latin and Spanish. She also had a particular love for theology and humanist thought. Unlike many of her female contemporaries, she was encouraged to learn, not just to marry. Catherine's early adult life was marked by loss. At age 16, she married Sir Edward Burr, but he died just a few years later. Her second marriage to John Neville, Lord Latimer, placed her in the turbulent world of the Northern Rebellion. This was the Pilgrimage of Grace, which opposed Henry VIII's religious reforms, particularly the dissolution of the monasteries. In 1536, Catherine and her stepchildren were imprisoned in their own home, and Lord Latimer was captured by the rebels. Lord Latimer tried to appease both sides, but this nearly saw him accused of treason. After this tumultuous time, the Latimers moved south, and it is speculated by some that Catherine entered the household of Princess Mary, Henry VIII's daughter, but this is not known for sure. At any rate, Catherine would have visited court often due to her family connections there. By early 1543, Catherine Parr had been recently widowed for a second time. Her late husband, Lord Latimer, had died after years of ill health, leaving her both financially secure and politically connected. Catherine Howard had been executed in 1542 for adultery. The king, now over 50, was grossly overweight, depressed, and plagued by chronic pain from a festering leg ulcer. But he was once again in search for a new queen. And it was in this atmosphere, tense, volatile, and deeply unpredictable, that Henry VIII turned his attention to Catherine Parr. Henry was no longer the golden prince of his youth. He was paranoid, ill-tempered, and deeply mistrustful. Many around him lived in fear. To attract the king's attention in such circumstances was as much a threat as it was an honour. At the time, Catherine had quietly fallen in love with Thomas Seymour, the charismatic and well-connected brother of Henry VIII's third wife, Jane Seymour. He was everything the king was not. He was young, ambitious, and charming. By all accounts, their relationship was sincere and full of promise. But fate and power had other plans. When the king made his intentions clear, Catherine faced a cruel choice: defy the most powerful man in England, or marry him and risk losing the man she loved. Rejecting a king, even gently, could be interpreted as treason. Henry had already executed 2 of his wives, and Catherine was not about to risk her neck. Catherine's acceptance was not only about duty, it was about survival. Yet Catherine approached this looming marriage with a sense of divine purpose. A devout reformist, she came to believe that perhaps it was God's will for her to serve the king, not just as a wife, but as a moral and spiritual guide. She later said, "Howbeit, God withstood my will therein most vehemently, and made me to renounce utterly mine own will, and to follow him most willingly." Her friends and allies warned her of the risks, but Catherine saw a greater opportunity. With her intelligence and faith, she believed she could steer Henry towards reform. She could protect the Protestant cause from within. She could educate and influence the next generation of rulers, Edward and Elizabeth. And so, in July of 1543, Catherine Parr became Queen of England. It was her third marriage and Henry's 6th. She was 31 and he was 52. Catherine took her role as queen and stepmother seriously. She forged warm relationships with Henry's 3 children, Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward, helping to reconcile the fractured Tudor family. She even organised their education, particularly for Edward and Elizabeth, using top tutors and emphasising humanist and classical studies, as well as religious texts. Elizabeth would later credit Catherine with nurturing her love for learning and faith. In many ways, the intellectual foundation of the Elizabethan Golden Age was laid down by Catherine Parr. Catherine also became close friends with Mary. Connected through their mothers, the two women were of similar ages and they had mutual interests in music and fashion. In 1544, the Spanish ambassador wrote that the new queen, quote, favoured the princess in all she can. In 1544, while Henry waged war in France, Catherine was named Queen Regent in his absence, a significant move which proved Henry's trust in her judgment. She governed England alongside a council, signed royal proclamations, managed finances, and even oversaw military logistics. It was a glimpse into what female leadership could be, decades before Elizabeth I would rule alone. By the time she became queen, Catherine was a passionate supporter of religious reform. A keen patron of religious scholars, she enjoyed reading and discussing new reformist ideas. Catherine's religious convictions leaned strongly towards Protestantism. She surrounded herself with reformist thinkers and theologians like Thomas Cranmer and Anne Askew. She authored Prayers or Meditations in 1545, a devotional work meant to guide Christians in private prayer. It was the first book ever published in England by a queen under her own name. Her second book, The Lamentation of a Sinner, went further, openly advocating Protestant ideas. But her outspokenness put her in danger. By 1546, conservative factions at court, led by Bishop Stephen Gardiner, plotted to have Catherine arrested for heresy. An arrest warrant was drawn with the king's consent, and the queen had no idea. When she discovered it, she cleverly played a different role, submissive and deferential. She told Henry that her religious debates were merely distractions meant to ease and distract him from his pain. Henry, flattered, forgave her. The next day, when the guards came to arrest Catherine, he sent them furiously away. She had outwitted her enemies, and once again, Catherine survived. Henry VIII died in January 1547. Catherine was now a wealthy dowager queen and was finally free to marry for love. And so she did. She secretly wed Thomas Seymour later that year without the permission of the new boy king, Edward VI. Her reputation took a huge hit, and her stepdaughter Mary deeply disapproved of such a hasty move. Though Catherine deeply loved Thomas, their marriage was far from perfect. Seymour pursued power obsessively and behaved inappropriately towards the young Princess Elizabeth, who was living in Catherine's household. This inappropriate relationship led Catherine to send Elizabeth away, both to protect her own marriage and to preserve Elizabeth's reputation. And then in 1548, at the age of 36, Catherine gave birth to her only child, a daughter called Mary. The Queen was delighted. She had her happy ever after. But unfortunately, her joy was short-lived. She contracted childbed fever and she died on the 5th of September. Catherine was buried in St Mary's Church at Sudeley Castle in Gloucestershire. But her baby, little baby Mary, disappeared from historical records by the age of 2. Her fate remains totally unknown. Catherine Parr was far more than the wife who survived. She was a regent, a scholar, a reformer, and an early advocate for women's education. Her stepdaughter Elizabeth would grow into one of the greatest monarchs in English history, shaped in part by Catherine's example. Her life proves that power doesn't always come from the throne, but from the mind, the pen, and the quiet strength of those who endure. Catherine Parr changed the face of queenship. She was a survivor, but more than that, she was a thinker, a leader, and especially she was a woman ahead of her time. If you like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories of history's unsung legends. Comment below. Who is your favourite Tudor queen and why?